I don't think the Bourke engine is good for any topology above 1,000 cc's. I think the Bourke engine is great for topologies between 49 and 1,000 cc's. It's the best engine in the world for that range of displacement. But if you want to go above 1 liter of displacement, or about 60 cubic inches if you're old school like me, then we have a new topology that we're researching on that, but I can't disclose any more than that. Just rest assured, we have a topology that in a form factor that's a little bit bigger than that Bourke engine that I demonstrated at the conference. So that Bourke engine I demonstrated is 30 cubic inches, half a liter. Okay? We have a topology that's marginally larger than that one, but is 6.7 liters.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
So that's going to be more than enough to power a car. And
yeah, we're talking 10 megawatts.
Yeah, and you could power your house off of that, too.
Dude, you could power the whole block. I'll put it this way. Man. Running at high RPM, which is maybe 15,000, 20,000 RPMs, we should be able to produce 10 megawatts of power with that design in a package that's 1 foot in diameter and 2 feet long. To give you some perspective, gigawatt, which is 1,000 megawatts, is what a lot of nuclear power plants produce.
Right.
Right. So you put 10 of these together, you have 1/10 of the nuclear power plant. You put 100 of these in a parking lot, you have a nuclear power plant's worth of energy.
Wow. 1.21 gigawatts.
Yeah. I mean, if you yourself have 10 megawatts of power, the things you can do with 10 megawatts is unfathomable. Farmers can make their own nitric acid en masse in industrial quantities in their barn using a Birkeland reactor. Doctors can make their own medical isotopes using cyclotrons. Welders and machinists can smelt, cast, and recycle their own metals inexpensively using arc and induction furnaces. There's so many things that can be done with such a high degree of power available on tap. We can't even really imagine the things people can do. One of the things that could be done with this much power on tap, you can create super deep borehole drilling operations using a plasma wavefront. So you can just glass material ahead of your tractor and plasma drill super deep boreholes at super high temperatures.
And welcome to the Vonu Podcast, the podcast making you invulnerable to the coercion of the state and the servile society. I'm your host, Shane Rayotu, coming to you from the Free Republic of PAZNIA, the Self-Liberator's Paradise. For more information on this Sec Realm network currently under construction, just visit PAZNIA, PAZNIA.com. Today we begin another new series here on TVP, tentatively titled Breakthrough Energy for the Second Realm. Now, we have released a couple episodes along these lines, one with George Wiseman and one with our guest today, but even then, my focus is more so trying to process all the possibilities. Now I'm seeing how close a few of these really are, these really amazing, liberating visions are from full pixelation and experience. So joining me is the head of our Department of Energy, Bueller. How are things going over there on the, the other side of the wall?
Things are good here. Just glad to be here and talk about this stuff because we're really interested in the subject.
Certainly. So, I guess my goal with the series, and Bueller can maybe speak to his too, but this is my goal. I'm not going to speak for him. But, my goal with the series is to introduce those who are unfamiliar to the vast ocean of potentialities and to hone in on a few solutions coming to the fore that can dramatically improve individual and community-based independence. Things like Brown's gas, hydrogen for fuel, understanding and harnessing the energy abundant around us at all times. Think Nikola Tesla, for instance. Mind-blowing antigravitics, monoatomics, and other experiments. Crystal power cells that run for years without a charge, and which are in the process of being scaled up. And I guess just a note here. Imagine energy literally being a currency, trading someone a phone-sized device that can provide like 2 years of power. It's crazy. But and I guess and further, just different visions of breakthrough energy motors, the Bourke engine, Adams motor, and more that I'm certainly unfamiliar with. And with the manufactured nonsense happening in the first realm, that is the purposeful inefficiency in internal combustion, centralizing monopolistic control over oil, and half-hearted solutions like solar panels fed into the grid. There's no more important time for this information to come forward. Today, I welcome back Sky Huddleston, co-founder of the aptly named Liberator rocket heater, breakthrough energy engineer, and really just a quite brilliant and studied individual. You can find his first appearance here on the Vonu Podcast, episode number 138, vonupodcast.com/138. Excuse me, where we got an introduction from Sky and what he's working on. Anyway, today we'll get an update on the Liberator rocket heater and the coming Tesla turbine. We'll go deep into the problems with modern internal combustion engines, along with the built-in scamming and inefficiencies. We'll have Sky give us some history and background on the Bourke engine, and most importantly, why it's not a staple today. We'll talk about possibilities beyond travel. I recall from our first discussion some astounding ones pertaining to everyone having a mobile 1 megawatt generator on board, which is just crazy to think about. And finally, it's a little less technical little less technical stuff at some point. I want to dig more into Sky's personal philosophies, perspectives, and motivations. We'll see where that gets worked in. Not really quite sure yet. But Sky, welcome back to the Vonu Podcast, my friend. How are you this evening?
I'm doing quite well. Thanks for having me on.
Oh, sure. So, I guess let's get right into it. We talked last time I had you on a little bit about the Liberator rocket heater. But yeah, give us an update on the business, the product, the progress, etc.
So the business is doing fine. It's been mostly on cruise control. We've been taking the revenues and we've been reinvesting that into developing new technology. One of them, as far as the rocket heater company is concerned, that I'm really excited about is the solid fuel gas turbine engine. So what this is a Tesla turbine that is being utilized for the solid fuel combustion of wood chips, biomass, wood pellets, waste tires, coal, etc., agricultural waste, and what have you. And this should produce between 3 and 5 kilowatts of continuous output power so that one person can, with a 100,000 BTU stove, provide all the electricity they need for their whole home and then some. So now they have a truly decentralized methodology of producing their own power from any combustible material on hand. The Tesla turbine has been historically described as it's been described as a solution looking for a problem, and we found that problem. The problem, of course, being how do you burn solid fuels, which contain ashes such as coal, wood chips, agricultural waste, etc., and prevent the ashes, these solid particles, from causing erosion of the turbine blades. Because obviously, if you burn wood or solid fuels in a normal turbine, the ashes and particles will erode the turbine blades very, very quickly. Well, a Tesla turbine works differently. The Tesla turbine uses the boundary layer effect. So because all the gases flow parallel with the disk faces, there's not going to be any erosion or ablation of the surface material of the disk. And so now we can run solid fuels in this turbine with no detriments to longevity.
Wow.
So I'm slightly familiar with the Tesla turbine, and it usually uses a liquid, correct?
Yes, in this case, it would be a gas. So most Tesla
Okay.
turbines that people build in their homes, right, they'll run them off compressed air or steam or what have you. In our case, we're still running it off of a gas, but rather than an external combustion steam engine or a Freon engine or whatever, instead we're running it as a direct air-breathing engine, like a jet engine or a gas turbine engine. So you have a conventional centrifugal compressor that draws in combustion air. You have a solid fuel firebox, which is your combustion chamber. This allows you to put in burn grates and other mechanisms through which the solid fuel can be fed in. And this burns, and then we have a converging diverging ceramic de Laval nozzle, which takes the high delta T thermal gradient and it converts it into a high delta V supersonic gas flow. This supersonic gas flow is then directed into the inlet volute of the Tesla turbine. And of course, because Tesla turbines want speed, not air pressure, that is to say, turbines want air velocity, not air pressure. You can have a lot of pressure of air, but if you don't have velocity, right, you're not going to get much power. You have to convert that pressure, or in this case, temperature, into velocity. And because we don't have a lot of pressure in our firebox, maybe 2 to 5 psi, but we do have a lot of heat, we have to convert the heat into velocity. And so that's where the converging diverging de Laval nozzle comes in, which is what all rockets use to convert their chemical energy into delta T.
Okay, so the boundary layer effect works with gases as well.
Yeah, well, all Tesla turbines exploit the boundary layer effect regardless of the gas that they use. The only difference is that in our case, because our Tesla turbine is being used for the combustion of solid fuel, we're going to get a far greater power to weight ratio, power density, and power output nominally than you would through other methods because the heat is being directly converted into mechanical energy. There's no recombinant
Okay.
loops, there's no heat exchangers, there's not a boiler, etc.
What kind of RPMs does that spin up to?
So we actually haven't built the turbine yet. We're still building. We actually have the combustion chamber built. We have the compressor hooked up, and we found that there's some problems with the door. So a normal fiberglass rope seal that's typically used in a wood stove didn't work at all. It leaked like a sieve, right? Which is why we prototype and test things. And so now we're using a different style of door that shouldn't leak at all. Instead, so rather than using a fiberglass rope seal, which is good to 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit, we've actually downgraded to use a silicone rubber seal. Now you can't use a fiber seal on. I might have a fiber seal on my desk. How I do. So this is an example of a fiber seal, right? And the fiberglass rope seals that are typically used in wood stoves, they're made out of woven fiberglass, and so air can leak through them. That is to say, they're porous. And so that's not very good to form a seal for a door for a wood stove, especially one that's under positive pressure. Most wood stoves work off of draft, they work via negative pressure, so it's not a big deal if a little bit of air leaks in, just so long as no smoke leaks out. Well, in our case, we have a pressurized combustion chamber, so nothing can leak out at all. Anything that leaks out is an egregious loss of efficiency and a safety hazard. And so now we need a perfect seal. So in our case, what we did was we downgraded to a silicone rubber seal, which isn't nearly as porous. I mean, you only have to worry about the porosity of rubber if you're dealing with a vacuum environment like space, and even then it's a very, very slow leak. So in our case, it's effectively non-porous or non-permeable because it's a
At
silicone
5
rubber
psi,
seal.
it's effectively non-porous. Yeah.
Exactly, right? Now, but this introduces another problem. Because it's only rated to 500 degrees Fahrenheit and the door will get hotter than that, how do we keep the silicone rubber seal from melting? And the way we did that is we built another air gap shroud around it. So now air, fresh air, the combustion air is coming in, has to bypass over that seal and then around the front of the door and then into the combustion chamber. And so now the combustion gases are never going to contact the silicone rubber seal, and so now we have a system that can seal off high temperature gases without the seal itself ever being exposed to said temperatures.
Hmm. Very nice.
Yeah. Yeah, that's incredible to hear. So, I guess so people can get the Liberator rocket heaters now, and you're getting closer to the prototype of the Tesla turbine. What's I guess the is what do you think in terms of time frame when those will become available?
I would like to have the prototype built in a year and it be ready for commercialization within 2 or 3 years.
Gotcha.
Because even after we have the turbine built, we have to perfect the manufacture of the turbine, and then we have to build all the ancillary systems that go with it. We have to hook it up to a generator head. We have to build a control module. We have to hook up the whole system to a boiler so that the waste heat of the turbine can be used to heat water, so that people can have a hydronic heating system for heating their homes, their baths, etc. Right? Then we have to build a protective shroud around this because this is going to be an outdoor unit, like an outdoor furnace. And so there's a lot of things that need to be done before we can introduce this into the commercial market.
Sure. Sure. Very good. Very good. And what's the is it rocketheater.com is the website for that?
Yeah, our website's rocketheater.com for the wood stoves. Yep.
Okay, great. So, yeah, I guess let's go ahead and get into. I watched one of your, I guess, some of one of your talks from a conference, and I figured we could cover some of this here. We covered a little bit of it in our first conversation, but I guess really hammer the point home. But Yeah, I guess could we talk a little bit about the inefficiencies and I guess the scam of internal combustion engines in the 20th and 21st century? Because I remember just as well, the 1906 Model T gets basically the same gas mileage as cars today, so there really hasn't been any real forward innovation in that direction. So yeah, could you speak to
Yeah,
some of
the
the
Model
inefficiencies?
T. Yeah, the Model T averaged at about 21 miles to the gallon, and the original Volkswagen Beetle, which was designed in the 1930s, the Volkswagen Beetle got 38 miles to the gallon, and that was in the 1930s. So there's a serious problem with that. I mean, I'm sure anybody with eyes to see can see that we can't have vehicles in the 1930s getting more MPGs than vehicles today. That's unacceptable. Yet this is where we are at in the modern century. And there's a bunch of reasons for this, right? Throttle plates create parasitic pumping losses. Stratified charges don't burn as well as homogeneous charges. Deflagration based engine systems are absolutely horrid. We have, you know, valve train. You have losses in the valve train, right? So even with 4 valves per cylinder, just the amount of energy it takes to turn over that valve train is very, very high, and the parasitic pumping losses that come with that. You have the problem of effectively molecular scrubbing across the boundary layer of the piston of your combustion zone, robbing heat. Anytime you try to burn liquid fuels, it doesn't really work well because the latent heat of evaporation ends up robbing the heat of combustion itself, and so a fair lot of your combustion heat goes towards vaporizing the fuel, whereas you could use waste heat to phase change the fuel into a gas before entering it into the intake plenum, and so that would save a lot of efficiency there. There's a lot of efficiency losses in normal internal combustion engines that really don't need to be there. For example, I don't know if you know this or not, but did you know that extra liquid fuel is injected into the gasoline engine to prevent it from detonating? Because if it runs too lean, it'll detonate the fuel and it'll break the engine. And so extra liquid fuel has to be injected so that this latent heat of evaporation can keep the cylinders cold enough so as to prevent the detonation of fuel.
Yeah,
That's a serious problem.
yeah, certainly, most certainly. Yeah, yeah. It's the list is never ending. I mean, I remember listening to George Wiseman talk about this, and when he was coming forward with his fuel saver patents with his fuel saver kit, he looked back at all the fuel saver patents from like I guess Mercedes had one in like the 1920s and before and all this. So none of this stuff is new. But none of this stuff is new
And they all
at
work
all.
the same way. They all work in the same way. They take the waste heat, be it from the coolant system, the exhaust, or a combination, and they use it to preheat the fuel and sometimes preheat the air, and they get incredible mileage out of it. So Cummins in the 1970s, they worked with the U.S. Army in a joint venture agreement. They had a joint venture project, and this was called the TACOM. It was the Cummins TACOM adiabatic engine. Now, it wasn't technically adiabatic by definition, but don't harp on me. That was Cummins' choice of words, not mine. Take it up with Cummins. But Cummins developed what they called the adiabatic engine program. This was done with TACOM and the U.S. Army, and this was to tackle a very unique challenge. The Army wanted to figure out why so many of their trucks were breaking in the field. And what they found out was that well over half of all their vehicles that were breaking down were as a result of a failure in the coolant system. And what they deduced is that the only way to obviate this failure is to eliminate the coolant system. So Cummins built a big diesel engine. They modified one of their diesel engines to no longer need a coolant system, which is fucking awesome because it increases reliability. But when you get rid of the coolant system, you have to do something with all that heat. And the only other thing you can do with it is turn it into mechanical energy. There's no other way to dump it. Because if you dump the heat, then you need a coolant system again. So they had to build a more efficient engine to get rid of this heat so that they would be able to eliminate the coolant system and increase reliability for the U.S. Army. And they achieved a thermal efficiency of 48% in the 1970s. This was the early 70s, mind you. And this was called the adiabatic engine program. You can look it up. It's peer reviewed. It was, SAE has all the paperwork on it. It's a real thing. They achieved 48% thermal efficiency in the 1970s. Modern ICEs and commuter cars today don't even get that. The diesel trucks used in over-the-road trucking, they're not 48% thermal efficient, but yet Cummins was doing it in the early 70s. Henry Unick who I have Henry Unick books, Henry Unick's book right here. He wrote several books, Track Tips and Power Secrets. Henry Unick is considered by many to be the best engine builder and hot rodder to have ever walked the face of the earth. In the early 1980s, General Motors, specifically the Pontiac division, gave him a bunch of money in a car and said, build a really cool fucking engine using our Iron Duke platform. And he did it. He built what he called the red hot vapor engine, and it worked. It was tested by General Motors. It fucking worked. He doubled the factory horsepower, and he doubled the fuel economy. He was getting 48 miles to the gallon. If my no 51. He was getting 51 miles to the gallon in the early 1980s. And John DeLorean was scheduled to fly out to Henry Unick and meet with him to discuss and actually sign a contract. The intent was they would sign a contract that day to put the red hot vapor fuel system as the OEM standard in all of the DeLorean DMC 12s. Right before he was scheduled to fly to Texas to sign that contract, he was arrested for drug trafficking charges, which were all dropped a year later.
Wow.
What a coincidence.
Yeah.
Man,
It is
what
quite
what a
coincidental.
coincidence.
Yeah.
Yeah, no joke, no joke. So it's interesting you mentioned Cummins, because Cummins now, they're one of the ones that is talking about producing a commercial hydrogen motor, which is interesting.
We already live in a hydrogen economy. That's the big lie that's being sold to people. Liquid hydrocarbons, a vast majority of their energy doesn't come from the carbon, it comes in the hydrogen content. All the carbon is there for is to allow the hydrogen to be stored in a safe, convenient, stable, pumpable, and transferable liquid fuel. Because if you try to store hydrogen by itself, you have to build hydrides. And then you run into issues of hydrogen embrittlement. You run into, hydrides being safe, unsafe, and dangerous, and hydrides being very expensive, having a very low life cycle, high maintenance. It's really not worth it. It's not worth it at all. There's no real good. There's no good. Or you have to store the hydrogen cryogenically. And cryogenic hydrogen is super dangerous, and it's super energy intensive to store it cryogenically. So at the end of the day, it's just not worth it. We already live in a hydrogen economy. The carbon and hydrocarbons are just there to make the hydrogen safe, stable, convenient, easy to pump, easy to move, a good liquid fuel. That's all the carbon's there for.
Okay, so what do you think about like hydrogen on demand, like catalyzing the electrolysis of water, such as like Brown's gas and stuff like that?
I don't really know enough about it to have an opinion too strongly. Of course, obviously, people say, "Well, it will violate thermodynamics if you were able to get more hydrogen out than you were able, through electrolysis than the energy put into it, right?" Um, Again, maybe with catalysts that might not be necessarily true. I know if you use an aluminum as a sacrificial pseudo catalyst, then I know you'll get way more energy in the form of hydrogen out than you will the energy input, because most of your energy is in the form of oxidizing the aluminum. But that's a whole other story entirely. HHO systems are unique because I think a lot of their benefits are provided in the form of cooling and the introduction of water vapor, which improves engine efficiency. So one of the reasons why conventional engines will detonate if they go lean is because they have such a high air to fuel ratio that it induces an environment where it's highly prone to detonation. But if you dilute the mixture with something like water vapor or nitrogen gas, you reduce the propensity for detonation in a conventional engine immensely, and your expansion and working fluid, in this case water vapor, has a better expansion ratio than nitrogen gas, and so you get improvements in fuel economy.
Okay, yeah. I've been actually very interested in Brown's gas technologies, and I saw you gave a talk on the Bourke engine a while back, and the guy that introduced you had mentioned something about water fuel tests, and I was gonna curious to ask you if there have been any water fuel tests with the Bourke Engine.
Well, so Dr. Peter Lindman and I have discussed this. Dr. Peter Lindman has pointed out that it is, in fact, possible to create an engine that runs off of atmospheric energy in the form of air. We know this is possible because the water bird exists. The drinking bird. And the drinking bird is a little water toy that dips its beak in a little cup of water periodically, and so long as there's water in the cup, it dips its beak over and over again. Another example would be atmospheric clocks, and these are clocks that have a little diaphragm that go up and down according to a differential in air temperatures, which those two things' existence alone proves that it is indeed and in fact possible to extract heat from the atmosphere. Peter Lindemann hypothesizes that it's possible to extract a lot of energy from the ambient environment using an ultra-high compression ratio engine and direct water injection right at top dead center so that the water will flash to steam and then expand, and this will cool the air to a lower temperature than ambient, and then you can exhaust it, out the exhausts. It makes a lot of sense to me. I don't know if it's possible or not, but it's something I would like to pursue in the future once we perfect this engine as a chemical engine.
Okay, very good. I recently was made aware of the Bourke engine by a mutual friend, John, and so I've been kind of diving into it, and it seems elegantly simple. And you also had mentioned it before on this podcast as well. How it can work off of almost any liquid fuel,
Yeah, any combustible
including.
liquid will. So I'm co-developing with this a pump based off of the Griggs hydrosonic cavitator and another pump that I've hybridized together. In fact, this is a kind of a cross-sectional diagram of it. Um, and what this pump does is it draws in any combustible liquid, it pressurizes it to 1500 psig, and heats it to 1000 degrees
Ah,
Fahrenheit, and this phase changes it into a
oh,
supercritical fluid. Supercritical fluids, of
that's
course, being
how.
a different state of matter, and then we push the supercritical fluid through niobium and zeolite catalysts to break it all down into monatomic free hydrogen radicals, carbon monoxide, and maybe a little bit of methane or other similar groups. Mostly monatomic hydrogen and carbon monoxide, however. And what this does is this allows the engine to only ever see a consistent, pure gaseous fuel comparable to natural gas in terms of its energy density and instant homogenization characteristics. So whatever you put in the tank doesn't matter. The engine sees a consistent product.
Okay. So at that temperature and pressure, pretty much all combustible liquids are in a supercritical state.
Yes, crude oil, waste vegetable oil, even if it's unrefined waste vegetable oil, waste motor oil, burnt brake fluid, thrown out transmission fluid, acetones,
Even bunker
ketones,
fuel.
paint thinners and strippers, coal, water, slurry fuel, you name it, doesn't
Wow.
matter.
Wow. Even a cold water slurry can be made supercritical and fuel that engine. That's amazing.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, yeah.
Which same goes for charcoal as well.
Yeah. So I guess could we go back? I guess get into a little. I guess a little bit of more basics here. Could we? I guess so. If this it sounds from what I know, from what I've heard about it, from what I've looked into it, it seems pretty incredible. As Bueller put it, elegantly simple. So I guess could you tell us a little bit about its history and its background and why we don't know about it today? Like what kind of transpired with it?
So the Bourke engine was developed in the 1920s and 30s by a guy named Russell Bourke, hence the name of the engine. And he built a bunch of prototypes. He ran them. He tested them. They worked really well. He almost got a contract with the Army to build them for the Army Air Corps. But then World War II happened, and they said, well, we don't really have, it's too risky because we're in a war right now, and, blah, blah, blah. And then his wife got sick with all sorts of illnesses, and then some unscrupulous business partners stole his prototype. And at that point in time, he was sold. He just said, fuck it, and gave up with it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Now, after he did that, then Melvin Vaux picked up on the project and continued to try to develop it and commercialize it. Melvin Vaux was one of the people that worked with Russell Bourke when he was building prototypes, but If you look at the quality of Vaux engines versus Bourke engines, I would know I own one of each, soon to be two Bourke engines. Melvin Vaux's engines were vastly inferior to Russell Bourke's engines in basically every way. He used cast iron crankshafts rather than steel crankshafts. He only used one counterweight instead of two counterweights. So there are a lot of problems with Vaux engines. The way the ports are drilled are all wrong on Vaux engines. So yeah, Melvin Vaux built basically reproduction Bourke engines that were of a lower quality and substandard. And so a lot of the independent tests that disprove the Bourke engine were actually done using Vaux engines. You have to get a real original Bourke engine to actually understand how it works. But Vaux engines are far more common than Bourke engines, unfortunately. So regardless, both can be made to work. And if you do your job well in assembly and ensuring that it has a very high compression ratio, the whole 9 yards, you'll find that Bourke engines have a supremely high energy density and a torque that is almost impractically high.
Yeah, interesting. And so we talked a little bit about some of these superior design traits, but I guess just from watching some of your presentation on it, it's got a lot less moving parts. It's a lot easier maintenance. I remember you mentioned taking it apart. I obviously the modern motor is kind of a mystery to me. I hope it's not at some point, but it does have to be this complex because I just you took it apart with just pretty quickly. So I guess yeah,
One
tell us
wrench,
yeah.
one wrench.
Tell us a little bit
You could
about the
completely
benefits.
disassemble it with. You could completely disassemble the whole engine with one wrench in less than 15 minutes. You can reassemble it in perhaps 30 minutes. And if you're really good, it would be a lot less than that. Of course, it takes me a lot longer because I'm very meticulous with how I assemble my Bourke engine because it's a historical, original. Only 18 in the world were ever made, and we don't even know how many survived of the 18. So I have to take my time when assembling it and ensure that everything's right. So I take a
Mm-hmm.
long time to assemble it. But if these were a mass manufactured consumer engine, you could easily have a technician who's very skilled slap one together in 15 minutes, no problem. That I'm confident in. The reason why it only has two moving parts is because it's a two-stroke, but unlike a conventional two-stroke, which requires petroil, that is a fuel-oil mixture, to lubricate the crankcase. In the Bourke engine's case, the crankcase is a splash lubricated, oil lubricated crankcase like a differential, so you don't need to use premix oil. This has a lot of advantages, not the least of which in reliability gains and longevity gains. And it allows you to remove the entire cylinder from the block because the cylinder is a monocoque construction. So you can remove the entire cylinder, which is built into the jug. That is, the head and the cylinder are all one piece. So there's no head gasket to fail. And you unscrew four nuts, and the whole cylinder pulls off. And now you can access your cylinder, your liner, your top rings, your piston, and your connecting rod and your rod seal, all right there by unscrewing four nuts. So you could top overhaul the whole thing in less than 5 minutes. You could completely overhaul the whole thing in less than 30 minutes. The way the crankcase is accessed, you drain the oil and then you pull off the side plates, which are held on by 8 nuts respectively on studs. The side plates come off, boom, and then there are two counterweights. The counterweights are held on by a singular nut across the journal, and then the counterweights come off. Now you can access your yoke plates, which are held on by a total of 6 screws and nuts respectively. Once the yoke plates come off, then the whole crankshaft can come out, the connecting rods come out, you're done. That's all of the components.
Yeah, that's pretty incredible. Yeah, Beeler, you got anything?
Oh, I was just gonna say that's very nice. I love because the video that I saw, you did take it apart in about 2 minutes, and it was
Mm-hmm.
pretty. I was impressed.
Certainly, certainly.
Yeah, I
So,
mean, it can be done very quickly. One of the things that I really like about this engine design, particularly, is because of the mechanism of action, it can withstand the forces of detonation. And anybody who knows anything about thermodynamics knows that isochoric heat addition is always more efficient than isobaric heat addition, all other factors being equal. And there is no heat addition that is more isochoric than detonation. So, in effect, what we've done is we've created a pulse detonation engine. Now, a lot of universities have been pursuing pulse detonation engines for decades because they know that PDEs are more efficient, full stop, period, by a long shot. The only problem is that they've been pursuing pulse detonation as an open cycle thrust engine for jets. Well, jet engines don't want to detonate the fuel. They go out, they snuff themselves out if they detonate. Piston engines want to detonate the fuel because they're in a closed environment. When you smash the fuel in a closed environment, it's got a constant, it has a specific narrow volume. That fuel wants to detonate, hence what octane ratings are for. Higher octane fuel just means that it can withstand more compression before undergoing detonation. Conventional engines will break if they detonate. They'll break because the pistons rock in the cylinder, which causes galling, which bends the connecting rods because the side thrust induced by said rocking motion, right? It's all sorts of nastiness. They'll blow head gaskets, they'll blow holes in valves, they'll overheat valves, they'll do all sorts of bad things, right? But in a Bourke engine, there's no head gasket, there's no valve train. The connecting rods remain straight at all times like a hydraulic ram, so that it can't bend the connecting rod. There's no side thrustage, which is the number one cause of cylinder wear, side thrust. And so, bada bing, bada boom, you've eliminated all the failure nodes that detonation uses to break the engine. And now you can have a pulse detonation engine, but it's a piston engine and it's super easy to obtain. You just use low octane pump gas with a high compression ratio, and you're instantly in pulse detonation. Super easy. So the entirety of civilization has gone about this backwards. They're spending billions of dollars trying to achieve pulse detonation in an open cycle engine for thrust. Then open cycles don't want to detonate the fuel, and then they're spending billions of dollars trying to avoid detonation in piston engines where it wants to detonate the fuel. Completely backwards.
Oh, it's a clown world.
Yeah. Certainly, certainly. So I guess something comes to mind for to me, Sky, and I'm not sure if you're familiar with it, but contrasting the Bourke engine with something like the Adams motor, which in super basic terms uses magnetism as the energy source. Why the Bourke engine? Because it seems like the Adams motor would require more tedious work, like actually building and soldering and learning, all the electrical stuff behind it. But the parts could pretty easily be acquired. But it seems like the Bourke engine
Yeah.
is pretty simple functionally speaking. But how accessible is the casting of steel motors for the average individual, or is this something that'd be just like a commercial venture that would come about, and that's kind of is it a difficult thing to
Well,
do? I
I
guess.
plan on commercializing it because casting, most of these components are either steel or cast aluminum. And I'm actually doing some aluminum casting right now, but aluminum casting isn't necessarily attainable to the average person. Even after you cast the aluminum, then you have to machine it, and then you need a milling machine and a lathe, and now you got to have a machine shop, and that's not really good enough for the average person. I mean, I don't know about you, but a lot of people can't fit a Bridgeport milling machine in their garage, let alone a lathe. So it's no easy task, right?
Yeah.
This is something that I would like to commercialize as a business. I would like to take these engines and enter the power equipment market. Think lawnmowers, wood chippers, motorcycles, things of that nature. And then we can, have higher efficiency, higher reliabilities, and higher longevities with greater ease of maintenance in all of our power equipment, our motorcycles, etc.
Yeah. That makes sense. Yeah, that's kind of what I figured. It's kind of what I figured. But I mean, from it's crazy too. Because I remember from our last conversation, like what would it be a 1 megawatt generator essentially on like every vehicle with one of these Bourke engines and all of the different ways that you can fuel
Well,
it. And that might not be the right measurement, but
so I don't think the Bork engine is good for any topology above 1,000 cc's. I think the Bork engine is great for topologies between 49 and 1,000 cc's. It's the best engine in the world for that range of displacement.
hmm
But if you want to go above 1 liter of displacement or about 60 cubic inches, if you're old school like me, then you want to. We have a new topology that we're researching on that, but I can't disclose
hmm
any more than that. Just rest assured we have a topology that in a form factor that's a little bit bigger than that Bork engine that I demonstrated at that conference. So that Bork engine I demonstrated is 30 cubic inches, half a liter. Okay? We have a topology that's marginally larger than that one, but is 6.7 liters.
hmm. Yeah.
Oh,
Hmm.
yeah. Oh,
Wow.
yeah.
So that's going to be more than enough to power a car. And
Oh, yeah, we're
I
talking
guess,
10 megawatts.
yeah. And you could power your house off of that too.
Dude, you could power the whole block. I'll put it this
Oh,
way.
man.
Running at high RPM, which is maybe 15, 20,000 RPMs, we should be able to produce 10 megawatts of power with that design in a package that's 1 foot in diameter and 2 feet long. To give you some
Wow.
perspective, to give you some perspective, gigawatt, which is 1,000 megawatts, is what a lot of nuclear power plants produce.
Right.
Right? So you put 10 of these together, you have 1/10
Oh,
of a nuclear power plant. You put 100 of these in a parking lot, you have a nuclear power plant's worth of energy.
wow. 1.21 gigawatts.
Yeah. I mean, if you yourself have 10 megawatts of power, the things you can do with 10 megawatts is unfathomable. Farmers can make their own nitric acid in mass in industrial quantities in their barn using a Birkelandite reactor. Doctors can make their own medical isotopes using cyclotrons. Uh, Welders and machinists can smelt, cast, and recycle their own metals inexpensively using arc and induction furnaces. There's so many things that can be done with such a high degree of power available on tap. We can't even really imagine the things people can do. One of the things that could be done with this much power on tap, you can create super deep borehole drilling operations using a plasma wavefront. So you can just
Hmm.
glass material ahead of your tractor and plasma drill super deep boreholes at super high temperatures.
Wow. That sounds even better than the nuclear powered drilling machines.
Yeah, I mean, your power source is independent of your drill type. The point of the matter is, with this much energy density, things like that become viable.
Yeah. Yeah. And as far as fuel efficiency goes, how do these things, like, about how well do they work?
So we had our Bourke engine independently tested by Thunderstruck Aviation, which is a really tiny company out of Florida. There's only a handful of employees. I can't disclose what they're doing. I'm under an NDA. However, it is a real company, even though they don't have a website. They sell drones to a client that I can't say, but I'm sure you can imagine. Regardless, they tested our engine. They were thinking about using our engine in their drones. That deal fell through because we couldn't agree to a price. But but um, they tested the engine and it came out at 52% thermal efficiency, which is really good for a half-liter over square two-stroke conventional deflector head cylinder ported engine. Really good.
And what was the fuel type?
The fuel type was kerosene.
Okay. Nice.
Hmm. Yeah, certainly, certainly. So I guess to since Sky, you've got a wide a wide breadth of knowledge here. Just curious to get your thoughts. Any experience with R-charge magnetic motors? I asked because we had one recently donated to us here, the PAZNIA Department of Energy. So yeah, any experience or knowledge on magnetic motors?
Nope.
No.
Nope. I'm a pure mechanical guy. My knowledge on electrical engineering is cursory at best.
Sure. Understood. Understood. So I got one question, and because I think this is relevant to the Bourke engine too. What a listener, or I guess a PAZNIan question. What are your thoughts on reverse pyrolyzed fractional distillation? Which it sounds like Bourke engine could run off of, because I think that's just this, like, it's the slow burning of plastics to get, get the, I guess, the
Oh yeah,
hydrocarbons
it'll
off of
do
it.
it.
So it
Oh
would do
yeah.
that. Yeah.
It'll so if you pyrolyze plastics into a gas or liquid, it'll do it no problem. Which the Kadukian pump, that aforementioned pump that we're developing, if you grind plastics into a slurry and then put it in water or oil or gas or whatever, it'll burn it.
Yeah. It's amazing. That's amazing. So, um, yeah, I guess let's see here. I don't really have too many other questions. But I guess yeah, Bueller, any more questions on the Bork engine, or I guess more the energy topics? Because I guess that's really all I have in terms of that.
Well, I had just come up with one, I guess, because like I was pretty impressed by the charcoal slurries being able to go supercritical, and now you're talking about the grinded up plastics. Is it because of the chamber that actually has high enough pressure and temperature that even the plastic goes supercritical?
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome.
Any combustible hydrocarbon, polymer, whatever. Name a plastic that doesn't burn at 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit or doesn't, pyrolyze it at that temperature.
Right. I tend to think of supercritical fluids as like a liquid state, but it's something kind of between liquid and a gas almost.
It's not
And
between; it's its own thing. It's a different state of matter entirely.
yeah, yeah, it's completely different state of matter.
I've been arguing that
But
supercritical fluids was a different state of matter for about a decade now, and only last year was it recognized as a unique state of matter.
so I guess what happens is at that temperature, the plastic melts into a liquid, and then you can pressurize it to supercritical pressures.
Well, yeah, basically. So it's being pressurized and heated simultaneously. So there's a little bit of melting, a little bit of sublimation. There's a lot of things that go on. But yeah, effectively it
Okay,
is converting the plastic into a liquid, melting it down, and then pressurizing it and heating that further until it becomes a supercritical fluid.
that's awesome. Reminds me of Back to the Future, how they could run the car off of garbage.
That's literally the plan.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, awesome.
Yeah, it's funny. I'll mention in the last PAZNIA SiteGround Assembly, that was one of the conversations brought up where we got into these energy sorts of topics, and one of the guests was like, yeah, like everything's recyclable is the principle I'm coming to now, and like we can burn trash and like have our energy, and it's like, yeah, seems like we can do that. Yeah, it's pretty amazing. It's a whole new paradigm way to look at things. Energy isn't this scarce thing anymore. Like it should have never been to begin with. And I'm glad we're coming
No,
around
it
to
really
this
shouldn't.
point where it isn't, where it doesn't have to be.
Energy scarcity is bullshit. We've had molten salt reactors since the 1960s, and that would have solved it 60 years ago.
Yeah, yeah, and yeah, just like in there. I mean, I've said it before, but yeah, like the most of the shit that happened in the 20th century didn't have to happen. Whether we're talking about the energy space, like the energy scarcity, or a lot of the health stuff, a lot of it didn't have to happen. But yeah, it's good.
Yeah.
It's coming back around. It's good. It's coming back around.
Well, in fact, tetraethyl lead was added to gasoline to increase the octane rating so that you can bump up compression ratios and achieve higher power outputs and efficiencies in a conventional deflagration-based engine. That wouldn't have been necessary if we used pulse detonation Bourke engines because Bourke engines want detonation, and so tetraethyl lead would have offered no benefit to gasoline or to Bourke engines. So the entire tetraethyl lead debacle would have been entirely avoided if people built Bourke engines en masse.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Now,
Yeah. And
now the other thing that people don't talk about is tetraethyl lead was replaced with methyl tert-butyl ether. What the people don't talk about is methyl tert-butyl ether is arguably even more dangerous than tetraethyl lead. But does that surprise anyone?
yeah. Yeah, so I guess one interesting thing, and I think I heard it in one of the talks that you gave, that you traveled out with. So not only are you just an expert on it, you have one of the few, few Bourke engines out there. You're kind of like the world's foremost expert on the Bourke engine now, right? And you kind of got that. I guess you kind of got that to some degree, or that recognition by the previous founder, the last guy. The torch was passed down, I guess.
Yeah. So Roger Richard, and he's still alive, thank goodness. He's been building Bourke engines since the 1970s. I would actually say that he's the world's foremost expert on it, but I would be I guess not far behind by de facto. I don't feel like an expert, but I guess here we are. No one else to turn to other than Roger.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, hey, hey, it's I've been. Yeah, we're all here to do something. It seems like you're here to build Bourke engines, commercialize them. At least it's one thing. But I guess speaking to more generally there, I'm curious because you're younger. You're just a couple years younger than me. I'm very passionate about what I do. I have my own my own motivations and such. Could you speak to what's your goal? What are your motivations? What keeps you motivated to do these things?
Well, so what got me into this is basically when I was a teenager. I achieved I got to the age where I could legally hold a job and work right after the housing bubble popped. Yay! So as I'm sure you can imagine, getting a job wasn't going to happen. And I was raised by a single father, and we didn't have a lot of money. And so we always said, no, we don't have the gas money to go here. No, that's too far of a drive. No, the mileage on the car, it'll break down. Shit like that, right? And so I had to fix a lot of the engines myself, the lawnmowers, wood chippers, things of that nature, right? So I became quickly familiar with how engines break, why they break, and with their inner workings, their inefficiencies, the whole 9 yards, right? And I said, the hell with this. I don't want anybody in the future ever to have to say we can't afford the gas, or to have a breakdown or have a pain in the ass fixing it when it does break. I said, I want people in the future to have engines that are robust, reliable, easy to maintain, and super fuel efficient.
Yeah.
People have died due to the unreliable nature of contemporary ICEs. I'm not even joking. It breaks down in the middle of nowhere. Somebody gets stranded, they die. Um, it's a serious problem. The All of our modern engines are running at the cusp of failure. They are always a hair, a sliver, thinnest paper thin sheet, whether it's the literal paper thin oil boundary layer, the ignition system, the fuel delivery system, the coolant system. All of these things are always on the cusp of failure. And I wanted to build an engine that's not running at the cusp of failure, something that will work every time.
Amazing. Yeah. Yeah, that's it's definitely needed, and I'm glad you're taking that up. It's definitely needed. And I guess just so there might be other so hopefully there'll be more folks like you in the future that are knowledgeable on these. So hopefully people don't have to be, because they're so easy that it's easy to do. But I remember in one of your talks from that energy conference a year ago, you answered a question with providing 3 books that individuals should read if they want to become experts on internal combustion engines. And to me, to someone who can speed read and assimilate, even if it's thousands of pages of extremely boring shit, that's really valuable information. So could you do you remember what those few books are in terms of internal
Yeah,
combustion
I
engines?
would recommend Fuel Economy of the Gasoline Engine by D.R. Blackmore, Henry Unick's Power Secrets, and the Championship Race Car Engine Builders book by Morrison, was it? Man, it's been years. It was a textbook from a drag racing company on how engines work. I should have that textbook here. Why is it not here? It's probably at my other place. Reher Morrison's Championship Engine Assembly. That's the book. I read that years ago. Recommend it. So those are the 3 books that you want to read. D.R. Blackmore's Fuel Economy of the Gasoline Engine, Reher Morrison's Championship Engine Assembly, and Henry Unick's Power Secrets.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Yeah,
Now,
that's
of course, there's a lot more books about the subject than that. In fact, there's 2 books that were recommended to me by Mark Cherry that I'm reading right now,
mm-hmm.
which is Internal Combustion Engine Fundamentals and Lycoming's Internal Fire. So add that to your list as well.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, always looking for more books to read, and especially like something like this. It's something and I know you mentioned I guess maybe some of the advantages of the Bourke engine versus like an HHO fuel saver kit. But like in terms of like something really practical, if it's really that easy to do to get on, so yeah, it is good, because I want to have a little bit of if we're gonna put them on I guess UTVs, side by sides, or stuff around here on the farm. I want to have a little bit of understanding. Well, you kind of have to if you're gonna put one of those on. I guess you have to mess with I guess the fuel to air ratio and stuff. So you have to have some sort of basic knowledge, and something like that. If I can sit down, have like a really thorough understanding, and over through reading a few books in a couple months, that'd be beneficial. So I guess that's the reason I asked. But yeah.
Well, air to fuel ratio is actually one of those things that's bullshit. The reason why conventional engines have to maintain a approximate 14.7 to 1 air to fuel ratio is because if they go lean, they'll detonate. If they go rich, they don't burn clean. That's ultimately why. The reason why they have to keep that AFR is because the extra fuel that burns later in the cycle quenches the cylinder head and the valves early in the combustion event. And as it continues, the piston continues away on its downstroke. It continues to burn later, but later you don't really need the quenching effect. So effectively, you're dumping extra fuel into a gasoline engine to keep the valves and the cylinder head and the piston cool to prevent detonation,
Gotcha. Yeah.
which is bull. Diesel engines already can run at a 1,000 to 1 air to fuel ratio, and gasoline engines can as well, or homogeneous charge engines can as well. The problem is that they detonate the fuel when they do, but if you have an engine that's designed to exploit the nature of detonation, now you can run super crazy lean ratios, which means your fuel consumption is determined by load, which means now you can get rid of the throttle plate. Now, once the throttle plate is gone, your parasitic pumping losses are gone, so that further improves efficiency. So there's a lot of things, right? More efficiency, more efficient designs beget more efficient designs, right? Doing one thing to improve efficiency allows you to do other things that also improve efficiency.
Yeah. Yeah. Very good. Bueller, any other questions or comments?
I guess I'm out of questions, but I will make a comment, and that is that the Bourke engine seems to be able to handle a wide range of fuels, and it seems to be like the most efficient engine design. And so I'm really excited about that and all the different alternative fuels that can be used with it,
There are some.
including perhaps, go ahead.
Oh no, go ahead. You go.
I was gonna say, including potentially Brown's gas and stuff like that. I'm kind of interested in experimenting myself with some supercritical Brown's gas if that's possible.
Yes, I'm sure it'll burn it. The question is how much will it improve efficiency. The answer is I don't know. Uh, the Bourke engine is not without flaws. So the original Bourke engine, as designed by Russell Bourke, uses cylinder porting. Cylinder porting is more reliable than reed valves. The problem is that it's a very poor, low volumetric efficient methodology of providing scavenging and internal charge pumping. I would like to upgrade it to use reed valves rather than cylinder porting, which will widen the power band even further, and it'll improve efficiency by really reducing the pumping losses. So it should bump up the value of metric efficiency to around 55 to 60%, whereas now I'd estimate it's around 40%. The other thing we want to do is use QUB deflector head pistons. These pistons are of a simpler geometry, and as a result, they'll provide better scavenging ratios that, with less blow by and a higher overall compression ratio, can be achieved using QUB deflector pistons. I want to upgrade and get away from a webbed crank to a tunnel crank, which is a stronger, more robust, and easier to maintain design. What else? I'd like to make it air cooled rather than liquid cooled. We'll see how that goes. Fingers crossed. Um, and I want to make it more modular so that these engines can be bolted nut to butt to increase displacement arbitrarily according to mission profile needs.
Nice.
Um, what else? I'm sure there's a couple of oh yeah, I want to move the spark plug from the side of the cylinder directly to the top dead center of the cylinder. Um, what else? That's off the top of my head. Those are all the modernizing improvements that I would like to integrate into the Bourke engine. That'll improve efficiency, power output. The only downside is the reed valves need to be replaced periodically, but I don't think it's that big of a deal for the gain of efficiency and usable power band that you obtain from it.
Nice. Yeah, that all sounds amazing, man. It all sounds amazing. I guess, yeah, like I said, I don't really have too much. Yeah, Bueller, go ahead if you got anything.
I look forward to seeing the modern version of the Bourke engine when it's upgraded.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like I said, the Bourke engine we're basically going to produce one variant. It's going to be a half-liter variant, and you can bolt them nut to butt to create whatever displacement you want. I am building right now. I have the block machined. I'm working on the crankshafts and the pistons now. I have the connecting rods, which actually this is a connecting rod to a 50cc Bourke engine that I'm building. But this 50cc engine will not go into production. It is way too cumbersome, way too heavy duty, way too overbuilt to ever be worth it for the mass market. because the price point we would have to sell them at is just absolutely astronomical. That being said, this is so overbuilt for a 50cc engine. We are going to fucking smash the 50cc engine land speed record because I checked the rules, and the rules basically govern the displacement, ignition type, things of that nature. So what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be doing something that nobody's ever done before in a piston engine, ever. I am going to be running a pure mixture of propane and bottled oxygen. So I will produce 5 times more power for a given displacement than any other conventional engine or any other engine on the market, period, because I can shove in 5 times more fuel proportionate to the gas being consumed.
Yeah. So I guess why propane? I'm curious.
Because it instantly homogenizes with the oxygen and prevents hydrolocking because of the extreme compression ratios that we're running. Any liquid fuel could induce hydrolocking, which will instantly break the engine.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's interesting. My grandpa used to have some cars that run on propane, and it's one of our transitionary steps to off grid is propane right now. And yeah, again, maybe putting a fuel saver kit on it, but propane seems to be pretty solid. So yeah, I guess just one other question that comes to mind. I just became aware of it, I guess, just maybe a month ago. But someone brought up open loop geothermal systems, which I wasn't actually familiar with. Do you have any knowledge on that? Anything you'd share? No.
Nope.
Okay.
No knowledge on geothermal.
Understood. All right. Awesome. Well, that's all I got. You learn anything else?
No, that's it.
Right on. Awesome. So Sky, thanks so much for coming back on the Vonu Podcast. Appreciate it. A wealth of information, and look forward to following your projects and supporting them however as possible. And yeah, obviously, if you ever want to come back on and talk about anything, let us know. Otherwise, yeah, let people.
Thank you for having me on.
Let people know where they can support you and I guess follow your work if they'd like to.
My website's rocketheater.com. Feel free to contact me there if anybody has any questions, any doubts. Skepticism is good, and I relish the challenge.
Yeah. Yeah, and I guess one other thing, which you mentioned in the first interview, what the efficiency, the efficiency of the Liberator rocket heater is past I guess SpaceX, was it an efficiency or just the same?
Yeah, so we achieved a combustion efficiency of 99.5%, and the SpaceX's Raptor engine achieves a combustion efficiency of 98%. So we are achieving a higher combustion efficiency with wood than SpaceX is achieving with a Methalox engine.
Yeah, it's legit. It's legit. It's crazy, but it's legit. Yeah.
Those aren't my numbers. That's according to the EPA. So take it up with them.
Yep. There you go. There you go. Well, Sky, thanks a lot, man. It was a pleasure, and we'll have to. I guess the last thing I'll say is you should come out to. We have a Vonu Fest here every year at the Free Republic of PAZNIA, and we've always got some interesting energy and health and wellness stuff. We're just out here, I guess, near Vandalia, or not like 90 miles east of St. Louis, so not that far away. John will be here. Would love to have you out here, and I think you'd find a lot of like-minded folks if you're able to come out. It's end of September.
I'm pretty open-minded. We'll see.
So
yeah, we'll see. I'm pretty open-minded.
Sounds good. Awesome to hear, man. Awesome to hear. Well, thanks again, and best of luck and the projects, and look forward to following along.
Thank you. You have a great rest of your day. You too.
Thanks, guy.
Thanks.
All right, guys, and there you have it. The first episode of the Breakthrough Energy series with Sky Huddleston. What a great discussion. Make sure to follow along with all of his stuff. I guess RocketHeater.com is to go for that, and hopefully we'll see him at Vonu Fest. John can hopefully twist his arm. I know we mentioned it to him last year, maybe, but hopefully he can get him here, because it'd be awesome, especially if Victor's there. It'd be awesome. It'd definitely be awesome.
Wow, yeah, that would be great.
So, all right, I guess we'll leave it there, guys. VonuPodcast.com for all things Vonu, PAZNIA.com for all things Free Republic, and LiberatorAttack.com for all things publications or privacy tools or as apothecary or whatever else. So, until next time, guys. See you.
The intent of the GhostPad is to offer a complete security and privacy-hardened computer system that is built from the ground up to be an effective direct-action countermeasure for those who want to actively resist the privacy intrusions of the entire surveillance state hydra, both public sector and private sector. A user-friendly computer that the owner maintains exclusive control over every aspect of its operation and has complete control over who accesses what data. A GhostPad is your virtual corner of the room where the cameras, microphones, and other data collection devices have no power. After all, power comes from ownership, which is exclusive control. Unlike practically any other available option, when you buy a GhostPad you are truly its owner. And while the masses beg and bleat to their political corporate masters to loosen their chains, GhostPad owners can use their systems as virtual bolt cutters and cut themselves free. GhostPads are high-quality business rugged laptops that have had the security-compromising system firmware, BIOS firmware, Intel management engine, etc., removed and replaced with more secure, free and open-source alternatives. The closed-source binary BIOS firmware has been removed from the system board and replaced with free, as in freedom, alternatives as well as the Intel management engine also being neutralized. That combination makes them more secure by design, and preemptively thwarts any attempts by threat actors, both public and private, to gain access by exploiting its vulnerabilities, either by an engineered in and hidden backdoor, or a zero-day exploit in the factory, supplied firmware or the Intel management engine. Perhaps the most important security privacy-enhancing feature these systems have is the neutralizing of the aforementioned Intel management engine, IM. The IM is a separate computer in a computer that is embedded into all Intel platforms made since 2008. It has its own operating system called Minix. It operates out of band, meaning that your primary CPU has no access to monitor what it is doing, and it has direct access to all the hardware that your primary CPU does, making it the ultimate embedded spying device. You can't audit what it's doing, it's always on when the computer is plugged in, or has battery power. It has its own network interface with its own MAC address that can bypass any system firewall configuration. It has its own storage you have no access to. It can access your microphone, camera, keyboard, can record keystrokes, and display, can screenshot your encrypted communications, while you are reading and writing them. The IM can only be disabled by modifying the system's firmware. That can only be accomplished by using an external programmer to reprogram the chip that stores the system's firmware. Only select laptop models can be modified. We concentrate on the compatible models with the highest performance available. We offer models that are 2x as powerful as any configurations sold and supported by Lenovo. Transitioning your computing activity to privacy-hardened platforms is a direct action strategy to resist the attempts at total omnipresence by the surveillance state. To put it simply, these systems are some of the few available that are likely compromised in some way on the firmware level, so they are some of the most secure and private available for use cases where those attributes are the most important. It is also why systems configured this way are considered as ideal to use as a base to install a security privacy-hardened OS, such as Qubes OS, Parrot OS, or other privacy-focused Linux distributions, on. To view the full selection of GhostPads, Ghost Phones, and other privacy tools available via Liberty Under Attack publications, just visit libertyunderattack.com/privacy tools. What are you waiting for? Step up your security culture today. Again, libertyunderattack.com/privacy tools. Liberty Under Attack publications, share your story, find your freedom.